Hello, welcome to the end of my sofa. I'm Chris Young. I'm currently the only director of Square Peg's Experts by Experience community interest company. But I'm going to kind of talk about that. I'm going to just kind of introduce myself to you, let you know a bit about myself in the context. I identify as somebody with a mental health problem and a couple of disabilities. I want you to join me in what I hope to be a movement for change. What I believe we can work together to create a movement for change. Now, currently we are, in the middle of a tsunami of hatred, so ableist hatred against us, against people like me, people like you. I'm going to take you on just a little trip, which was quite surprising for me. We've always known that prejudice and discrimination against people with mental health issues, problems, illness, whatever you care to call it, we know that prejudice abounds society. Now, for me, I have a label of personality disorder, and that prejudice and discrimination was even worse. Now, I've been an activist. I was diagnosed about 17 years ago, and a lot of the work that I did was really just shouting and making a noise, and I ended up getting around about 50,000 followers on Twitter through a walk around the edge of the UK, meeting people who you'll be delighted to know. Every person I met on my tour were lovely. People understand, they listen, So I guess that's a good starting place, isn't it? People are fabulous. People are really lovely. If you leave people to their own devices, they're lovely. So anyway, I became an activist after being a social worker for 17 years. Now, unfortunately, some of my my activist colleagues, my activist peers, will hear that I was a social worker, that I had chosen that profession, and for many people, they have been oppressed or mistreated by social work services. I understand that. I am not the representative of social work services. I'm a guy who was a social worker, who became a social worker because of childhood bereavement, neglect, sexual abuse, poverty, and because nobody was there for me, I thought I could be there for other people. Judge me on that. I don't know how good a social worker I was. I don't know how bad a social worker I was. Anyway, I was disabled. I was disabled out of social work because I really couldn't do it anymore. So for around about 17 years or so, I've been trying to make a noise. But at the moment, I'm feeling real sort of snow globification. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. You've got that feeling where your head's been shaken so much and the snow isn't quite settling down. It's just whirling round and you can't quite put a fix on it. And it's hard. I saw a job at the National Collaborating Centre for Mental Health, which is part of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Now, a good friend of mine, when I did get the job as a national advisor to the National Collaborating Centre for Mental Health, when I did get that job, he suggested that I had infiltrated the Death Star. And there are bits of me that feel, yeah, that kind of feels about right. There's been a lot of surprises on the way with that. Now, the thing that got me to apply for this job was a simple advert on the Royal College of Psychiatrists website, which was describing a course for professionals who work with people with my label, where it described us as dysfunctional. It described us as a thorn in the flesh of clinicians. And, felt difficult in two ways. One, that the author thought it was okay to say that, and two, that they assumed that their audience were okay with that. The other thing that sort of stood out for me was that the audience had been okay with it because it was a course that had been widely advertised before, and people had attended it. Social workers, mental health nurses, psychiatrists, whole mishmash of folk. So it felt weird. So the other thing that was weird was, as far as I could tell at the time, there was only one whistleblower amongst the email list, the email circulation list, who said, "Hold on a second, has anybody else seen this? It's a bit off." So we shared the hell out of it, and there was a furore, and there was a meeting to be held at the Royal College of Psychiatrists. Now, this was a really badly advertised meeting because it was advertised at the Royal College on the Royal College of Psychiatrists website. I don't know about you, but it's not a place that I go to very often. It felt a lot like, and I'm showing my age here, the start of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the Vogon fleet were talking to the humans because Earth was just about to be obliterated as part of an extension to some intergalactic superhighway, and people were complaining, and the Vogon leader said, "Well, you should have read it. It was there for everybody to read on Alpha Centauri, on the notice board, saying what was going to happen." And this was a lot like that. There were so many of us didn't. So a friend of mine got in touch with me and said, "Chris, you really ought to be at that meeting." So I turned up to that meeting, and it was weird. The people there, primarily psychiatrists. There's a few of us with a lived or living experience, but it was kind of odd. People were surprised at what had happened. They were surprised at the prejudice and discrimination that was going on. And I couldn't quite fathom why that might be. I mean, the then president of the Royal College, he was there, and he was saying he was shocked and surprised. He didn't know that the problem, the issue, was so widespread. And the question I know you're asking, well, I certainly asked, is, well, why didn't he know? Why? Why on earth would he not know? Round about the same time, there was a panorama film about, I think it's a ward in a hospital, and an undercover panorama journalist just signed up as a nursing assistant, a healthcare assistant, and worked there and filmed and took audio. And it may not come as a great surprise, but people were being treated like shit. They were being abused, they were being laughed at, talked over, ignored, othered, any horrible word you can imagine. All that was going on. And it was aired, and there was quite rightfully a lot of noise. Now, this is something we all know. As activists, we know this is going on because it's there, it's obvious, it's there. People were surprised. Not least the Care Quality Commission, who had gone on, who'd rated that ward while this guy was doing his research, and they'd gone on and they'd rated that ward as good. Now, thankfully, after they saw the film, they decided to re-rate it. But what's going on? Why on earth would that happen? Why such a mismatch? Why doesn't anybody believe us? Why is what we say considered as anecdotal when everybody else's voice is seen as solid testimony, clinical? It took a journalist to say, "Hey guys, have you seen this? It's really shit." Because when we were saying, "Hey guys, look at this, it's really shit," you would say that. You're a punter. You're a whining punter, whatever that means. So I was glad that we were given the opportunity to come along and talk, and bless his socks, the then president, Adrian James, he put a huge amount of money towards a massive project, which was to challenge the prejudice and discrimination primarily against people with a lived experience of personality disorder. So we've done a lot of work. I've done a podcast. I've so far interviewed 32 people, 2/3 of whom are punters, service users. I'm reluctant to call people service users because there are no fucking services. Anyway, so 2/3 punters, 1/3 are professionals. The interesting thing about, well, what I think about the podcast, yet to be released, it's called PD Squared, watch out for it. The interesting thing that stood out for me is that every single person I've spoke to has either experienced, witnessed, or viewed prejudice and or discrimination against people with a personality disorder label. The question is then, what's being done about it? Why was nothing being done about it? My concern, yes, is the people who are perpetrating this shit, but my big problem is the people who just get on with their daily lives. They watch it and then they do nothing. They don't respond. And I can kind of understand it because, you look at things like whistleblowing, and very rapidly it's not the whistleblower, it's not the message that the whistleblower's giving, it's seen as the issue, it's the whistleblower themselves. They're seen as the difficulty, and before you know it, the whole thing is sort of washed over. It's difficult. It's really difficult. These people have got mortgages. They've got careers to consider. These are their peers. These are the people that they want to work in amongst. So if they start kicking off against the people they're working with, they'll be rapidly othered. They'll be rapidly seen as a problem. And that is a problem. It's a massive problem. And we need we need to smooth that way. Now, because I'm what's called a lived experience, I've got a living experience of mental ill health, drives me nuts. I can lose between 2 and 7 days a week dissociating, which means the whole world becomes completely unreal to me, and I literally can't do anything because, well, it's impossible to do anything when you truly believe the world's not real. So I'm on this project, and we're talking to people and we're generating work, and to be perfectly honest, over 2 years, and we've worked very hard, there's been 10 of us in a core group, and there's been a further 30 in what's called an expert reference group, which is a mixture of people with lived experience and professionals. Thing that we haven't come up with anything new. We haven't come up with anything drastically different. But what we have done is we now have the ear of people with power. And that's, when I started out on this, I had some image that we were going to take over the world, we were going to make a massive change, and once other human beings saw this, they would react and things would start to change really rapidly. But over 2 years, 2 years is a long time when you're crazy and when you've got a disability. Over those 2 years, I haven't been working full time. I've been working on what's called therapeutic earnings. And that means I get paid partly through employment support allowance. I get partly paid through personal dependence payment. and I get partially paid by the Royal College of Psychiatrists. It's a sort of mix. I had asked to not be paid at all because I knew, as a social worker, that the DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, would make things shit for me. And spoiler alert, they did make things shit for me. They stopped my benefits completely 4 times, one of which they threatened to take me to court for fraud. I'm a social worker. I fucking love forms. Forms are great. So I'd filled out all the forms, and I knew what I was doing. So this is me. I know what I'm doing. What does that mean for other people? The stress of your benefits stopping is massive, absolutely massive, because there lies destitution. I've been homeless. When I was first diagnosed, I became homeless. And I can honestly say it's a bit shit. Thankfully, Edinburgh stepped up to that particular challenge and housed me pretty quickly. Yeah, they did, and it was okay. It's taken me the best part of 15 years to secure the benefits to which I'm entitled. 15 years of just constant plodding, which is shocking. I know the system, and it's taken me 15 years. So if MPs are telling you otherwise, it's a very difficult, opaque, difficult to navigate system. It's laughingly hard and poor. They have set letters that they send out which are threatening, which when you speak to an actual human being very often weren't meant to be threatening, but those are the only letters they've got. So we all sit there in dread of the brown envelope. So we're, as part of being the Royal College, I'm now appearing in front of lots of psychiatrists and medical psychotherapists at conferences and other places. And because my colleagues who are psychiatrists and a director and a manager, a project manager and researchers at the Royal College of Psychiatrists at the National Collaborating Centre for Mental Health, because they're vouching for me, people are hearing my voice. People are hearing my voice when I talk about my benefits being stopped, when I talk about the shit show that's happened, when I talk about the prejudice that I've experienced as a person with a label of personality disorder. They have allowed me, and this is crazy, they've allowed me to interview people and ask those questions and generate testimony from 32 people so far. I mean, this will continue long after the project's gone, and consider this a bit of an advert for that. You can join in anytime you like. This prejudice and discrimination is happening, and they're hearing it, and they're understanding it. And I'm lecturing at university, at Hertfordshire University. I'm not working more than 16 hours a week. I can't work more than 16 hours a week. But I'm talking to undergraduate mental health nursing students and undergraduate social workers. And it's surprising that they don't know, or a lot of them do know, they are aware of the prejudice and discrimination going on, but they're very nervous because already they know that when they go from university onto placement, they are invariably told that's not what it's like in the real world. You can come here with all your airy-fairy ideas of relational practice, but you come onto the ward or into the community, that's not what it's like. And that somehow gives people carte blanche to treat us like shit, to disrespect us, to give us a poor service. So this is the culture we're working in. And that's key. Prejudice and discrimination happen at 3 levels. They happen at the personal level, face-to-face, where somebody is awful. The second level, cultural. That's your ward level, maybe even your hospital level. But the worst level, and this is what's happening to us now, is the structural level, and they're coming for us, and they're coming for us hard. They're doing their best to divide us by saying, oh yes, there are good people and there are shirkers. There are strivers and there are shirkers. And they're coming for, which I think is a really unusual benefit for them to be coming for, is personal independence payment, because it allows millions of people to work. So when we're talking about benefits, we immediately think of, well, we're told to think about the royal family. Basically, not the royal family, but the series, the royal family, where people just sit around talking, not doing anything, living off society. And that's not the case. So many people use their personal independence payment to get to work. A huge part of my personal independence payment goes on paying my rent. My local rent housing allowance doesn't cover my rent. So I have to pay a substantial portion of my personal independence payment to live in what is admittedly a lovely house, where my landlord, God love him and bless his socks, undercharges us hugely, massively. But that's good fortune. I'm very fortunate. Where was I? I was talking about our voice appearing in front of other people. So I think what I'm talking about is the transition from activist to lived experience practitioner. Now, this is a weird one, because as an activist, yes, we can make a lot of noise. Crikey, we can make a lot of noise, and we are making a lot of noise, and it's getting into the media, and that is fantastic. But I was gobsmacked at suddenly how much my voice mattered and is mattering now, that because I was a lived experience practitioner at the Royal College, that facilitated me to do some lecturing with Hertfordshire University. It suddenly means I have access to folk, as I say, that people are listening and engaging. The problem, and this is a massive problem, the same people who gatekeep services, the same people who gatekeep mental health services, who judge us for being mad, too mad, being just the Goldilocks amount of mad for services, are exactly the same people who are currently gatekeeping our employment. They are the people who will judge us. They are the people who are asking us for a CV when we apply. They are telling us that we must have a computer that can deal with Microsoft Teams. We must have X amount of hours available. Now, I don't know how many people in my predicament were fortunate enough to have a computer, good broadband, I don't know, and a CV to apply for this job. Also, a lot of people I know didn't apply for the job for two reasons. The concern that the Royal College is a perpetrator of prejudice and discrimination, and they feel that that is an insurmountable hurdle. But also because they knew that the shit show with the Department of Work and Pensions could threaten them with homelessness. And they're right. It's bizarre and terrifying and cruel and unusual punishment. Imagine being out of work for 17 years, as I was, with a mental health condition where, with no services. I've been on waiting lists, NHS waiting lists, for around about 7 years in the past 10 years. When ultimately I found a third sector organisation called Safeline, who offered me a service which really patched me up and allowed me to at least function better, with nothing from the NHS except judgment and a statement that I was either mad, too mad, or it was okay for me to be on a waiting list for a zillion years, even though my GP had expressed their concern that they were really concerned about my mental health and my risk to my own life. Interestingly, in that time, I have developed arthritis, osteoarthritis, everywhere. Fantastic. I wouldn't recommend it. Trustpilot review, I'd give it probably 1 star. But I also got diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Highly likely caused by the weight gain, caused by long-term taking of antipsychotic and antidepressant medications. Don't think about coming off your medication suddenly. I've tried it. I'm 100 years old. So I'm experiencing these things. Never, ever, ever, ever come off your medication suddenly. It will drive you fucking insane. But with this in mind, I gradually came off my quetiapine. I now sleep twice a day for 3 hours each time, and I consider myself continental. So we're in this position where there's an expectation that people like me can come up with a CV with 2 referees and apply for jobs and sit through interviews that are structured around, in this case, the Royal College. What the Royal College wanted, what the Royal College needed. And that's insane. It's absolutely insane. We need systems where people like you, people like me, are interviewed, where we're recruited in a way that suits us. We talk about reasonable adjustments, and that has to be the very first reasonable adjustment. You know, whether or not you get the job is access to that job. So you can make an informed choice as to what that job is. So you're not jumping through some bizarre hoop to, I don't know, fit in. When I was a kid, I imagined that when I was 60, I would be building up to create a life-size model of HMS Ark Royal out of matchsticks, and then just settling down and changing nothing, just smugly looking back in my life thinking, wasn't that a hoot? I can't do that. I'm nowhere near that. And that's really what Square Pegs is about. It's a recognition that we aren't in control of our destinies, even though we're being told, hey, come work for us. Yes, we want lived experience practitioners. We want experts by experience. We want peer support workers. We want peer workers. Any of those titles. And we exist in the system from volunteers right up to board members. And yet there's no clear definition as to what we do, who we are, and what's expected of us, how much we would get paid. And because of that, it's a shit show. It's bizarre. There are people doing the same job as volunteers as people who are getting paid a lot of money. I was a social worker for, I think I might have mentioned, a zillion years. But very early on in my career, I was a social worker on a ward in a hospital in the Western General. And the first thing you want to do is you look at your multidisciplinary team, and they seem a nice bunch of human beings, but they have not a fucking clue what a social worker does. You know, this was the first time they had their very own attached social worker to the ward. And now, because this was my first job, I wanted to make a good impression. I wanted to fit in. I wanted them to give me, you know, positive regard. And they did. But they didn't know what I was doing. So a lot of their work was trying to carve me into something that perhaps I wasn't. And perhaps I was guilty in that I allowed myself to be carved a bit. But a lot of it was me saying, no, this is what I do. And I'd run courses to say, this is what I do. This is what social work does. And after 2 years, very often I would go up to one of my colleagues, whether they be a nurse, an occupational therapist, a junior doctor, a consultant, physiotherapist, whoever. And I'd say, what do you think I'd do? And they'd go, benefits, you delay discharge, care package. It felt bizarre, and that was after 2 years. Now, the problem with people with lived experience going on to wards, going to teams, people don't know what the fuck we do. And because of that, our roles are being defined by people who don't know what the fuck we do. So I recently attended a God almighty, what is wrong with me? A patient and carers conference at the Royal College. And I was really struck by the amount of people I spoke to who were patient representatives, who were lived experience practitioners, who had no fucking idea what they were doing or what was expected of them. They'd gone through all the application processes, and yet they didn't know what their job was, what their role was. This cannot continue. As a job, we have been around for 40 years, and yet we don't have a central body that describes or protects us, looks after us, tells other professionals what we do. If I sit in a multidisciplinary meeting, I can look at the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the physiotherapist, the occupational therapist, the nursing staff. Everybody has either a royal college or an association or a university or a union that's behind them. We have none of that, absolutely none of that. So we are expected to enter this potentially hostile environment, given the prejudice and discrimination that exists. We're expected to enter that with none of that support. On that subject, who supports us when we're working? Who sorts out our contract? Who works with human resources to say what our job should be? It's not defined. So the whole idea of square pegs is to change that. Now, something like this has been tried before, and I think it's been tried before a few times. And I can only speculate as to why this hasn't worked, because it's obvious. This is what we need. I think in the past, after years and years of incredibly hard work, funding has been pulled from different organisations. And that's meant they've just vanished, and they've vanished quickly, and it's been a disgusting, way of treating people like human refuse. Thanks, but no thanks. There is a recognition, a strong recognition, that we contribute massively to the workforce, that we make things better for punters. A friend of mine who is significantly wiser than me, a guy called Oscar, described us as the connective tissue that holds mental health services together. And that is bang on. And you might think that's a bit grandiose, but it's not. I'll tell you why. Professions are very good at living in silos. So you'll have your occupational therapy silo, physiotherapy silo. The two big silos are NHS versus social care silos. That's and third sector organisation silos. So think of those as three really big silos, big tubes where people just exist, where they sit seething and thinking bad things about people from the other groups and not really knowing what they do or what happens. The thing with your lived experience practitioner, with your person who has lived this, we know what it's like. We know what community services are like. We know what social work is like. We know what it's like to be in hospital. We know what it's like to have our liberties taken away from us. We know what it's like to be held in prison. We know what it's like to be treated like shit by the Department of Work and Pensions. We know all these things. We have a massive overview of the situation, and that's where our power lies. I've read on Twitter people that I have massive respect for saying things like, well, you know, if it was a choice between a clinician and a lived experience practitioner, I know what I choose every single time. And he did actually mean a clinical person. Now, I'm not about to say that I can do surgery, although YouTube is really getting us to an incredible place, isn't it? I mean, I fixed my washing machine about a month ago, just purely using a YouTube video. So I reckon, you know, with a bit of focus, a bit of concentration and right equipment, I could do knee replacements and then, you know, build up. Kidding, I'm kidding, all right? Just relax yourself. But as I say, we have a massive contribution to make. But we need to be in charge of who we are and what we do. I've looked around at different unions, and I think they're well-meaning, but we aren't their focus. We aren't, you know, they've got other fish to fry. And that is, it's a massive problem that we're very often just tagged on at the end. You know, we're sort of seen as, an afterthought. And I think it's really important that we are put right at the beginning. Now, with square pegs, I know that there are millions of unheard voices. I mean, doing this on the internet, I'm immediately excluding around about 5 million households. 5 million households who are desperately in need. Primarily, again, because of poverty. They don't have access to this sort of stuff. But some people who lack the technological knowledge. So as soon as, you know, once we've got people on the internet, we must reach out to these groups. We must work very hard to reach out to these groups and find out, what do they want? You know, if any of these people, do they want to become lived experience practitioners? Do they just want a fucking service? Do they think, just Chris, stop ranting, man? You know, all I want is to be looked after when I need to be looked after. I need support when I need to be supported. I've got no interest in invading this environment to call myself a professional in amongst a multidisciplinary team. And that's okay, because our primary focus has to be these people, has to be me when I need services. It has to be you when you need services, and then build on that. But I think we make a tremendous addition to that. So the whole idea of square pegs is that. Now, I've put it on Substack because, I don't know, I've looked around and Substack looks pretty funky. We can share videos, audio. I mean, I've demonstrated by the earlier posts. We can share written blogs, pictures, anything you like. I can interview people. You can interview me. You can interview each other. You can remove me from it and just send up videos. I want you to be involved in this. You're welcome to make this a kind of home for yourselves and bed in and do whatever you like. As I said, I am currently the only director of Square Pegs, and that is a very lonely place because I want this to be big. I think the only way ahead is for us to be positioning ourselves into places of power, not to give in to that power, but to become part of it. The only way, unfortunately, that we will get power, I believe, is if they yield it. And they're not in a... they're not currently yielding it. They're seeing us as a noisy, inconvenient other. But when we appear in front of them, like I did when I was walking around the edge of the UK, like I do when I appear in front of people at different conferences where they go, fuck me, he's a service user, he's a person with lived experience, he's not what I expected. So many professionals only ever see us when we're at our very worst. and they just assume that we remain at our very worst. That's how they imagine us very often, that we are this needy thing. They describe us as frequent flyers. They describe us as attention seeking, manipulating. They don't necessarily see us as us. And I think this is the way ahead. And I want us, I keep saying this, I can't say it enough, I want us to take control. I want you to start to think, do you think that a central body is necessary? Do you think having us a central, I don't know even what I'd call it, I want to do it really slowly. Anyway, let's think about what we call it further down the line. But I don't know, but a central thing for us that speaks for us, that looks after us. Do you think that's a thing, or could you not give a flying fuck? I mean, both opinions are valid. Given that, what do you think we do? What do you think we should do? What do you think our involvement should be? Should we be trained? What would that training look like? What support should we get? Now this, for me, is probably the next 10 years of my life. And I think after that I can sit down and think, well, that either worked or it didn't, but I gave it a crack. What I need from you, as I say, I need your involvement. I need you to become part of this. I want you to sign up. I'm a lone director. I need more directors. We need a membership. How are we going to collect money? How will we get money to support this? If there's loads and loads of us, then would people consider paying a tiny subscription to bolster this? How do we support each other in this endeavour? How do we support each other on the way? We know that mental health services fall down time and time again, and the worst thing very often isn't the lack of services itself. It's the crushing disappointment after being on a waiting list for up to 3 years, and you get there and you get 8 weeks of cognitive behavioural therapy, which doesn't go anywhere to meet your needs. How do we support ourselves? The whole thing with Substack is it seems to be able to have community discussions, community conversations. I'll tell you what I have. I have me, currently. I have a computer. I have a fancy mixing desk that I got for my 60th birthday. I have access to a car first thing in the morning up until about 1 o'clock every day. And that's it. That's all I have. I have no money whatsoever. Not a sausage. But I have passion and I want change. And I think together we can bring that change about. If this is your kind of thing, please listen, read, watch, contribute, join up, have a conversation. Tell me when you're available. We can have a Zoom meeting if you want to have a Zoom meeting where we discuss maybe what kind of future we have, or anything you like. My first year in this is going to be reaching out to routinely marginalised groups, people whose voices are never heard, people whose voices suddenly get tagged on at the end of projects where people go, oh shit, we haven't spoken to, insert minoritised group of your choice there. I don't want to do that. I want to put these people, our people, at the forefront of this. And thankfully, my mixing desk thing is portable. Now, a lot of people don't want to be recorded, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm sure a lot of people can communicate through drawing, writing, all kinds of ways, or just having a conversation with me. And I can collect those conversations, and we can collect those conversations. I'm really reluctant, here's a tangent, to talk about mental health leadership, because there's a real danger with mental health leadership is that people in the rarefied hierarchies of the NHS, if they call you a lived experience leader, they'll see you as representative of the people that you're speaking about. And for fuck's sake, look at me. I am a white, middle-class sounding, university-educated ex-social worker. Privilege exudes off it. I mean, it's very likely that that was one of the reasons I got the fucking job in the first place. So I'm not a leader. I'm not representative of anyone. You are representative of you. And if we can hear your voices, get your voices, then we can formulate a thing. Okay, right, I've spoken enough. Join up. Become part of this, please. Let's work together. We can work together. Let's define what this is. Take our time. We'll get there. Okay, bye for now.